Welcome to another episode of Behind the Registration Window. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm the collections manager here at History Colorado. For the month of October, I was inspired by the Halloween holiday, and I have chosen a number of really fun, eerie, creepy items that I think you're really going to enjoy. All right, so the items here on the registration table, there's a real variety of them. As I said, they've been inspired by Halloween. And let's go ahead and start with the top left over here. This is actually a topographical map of the Stanley Hotel. And many people know the Stanley Hotel, and it's pretty sort of famous for being a haunted hotel here in Colorado. There's a number of ghost stories related to the Stanley Hotel, but one in particular that I like is that supposedly one of the ghosts that haunts it is a former housekeeper of the hotel, Elizabeth Wilson, or Miss Wilson. And tour guides say that Wilson was lighting lanterns in room 217 when she was seriously injured in an explosion. And she survived the blast, but passed away a number of years later. And apparently she now haunts room 217. And guests have reported items being moved, luggage being packed up, lights going on and off, so really creepy experiences like that. She's also said not to be a fan of unmarried couples, and guides say that people who aren't married have reported feeling a cold presence between them while in the bed. So I think this is a really great story, and obviously the Stanley Hotel is also the inspiration for Stephen King to write The Shining after a stay at the hotel. So definitely a creepy part of Colorado history. I've also included a photo at the bottom left just of the Stanley Hotel as well. Next on the table, though, these glass items right here. These are called witches' balls, and these are really interesting. So these were very popular in 18th century England, and they would have been hung in windows to ward off things like witches' spells, evil spirits, ill fortune, things like that. And by hanging these decorative balls in the windows, it's thought that they would tantalize evil spirits, which may be threatening, a home. And so upon seeing this, a evil spirit would be mesmerized by the ball's reflective beauty, and once it touches it, it would actually be captured and trapped inside this ball, and protecting the home. So I think these are really cool. They're actually really beautiful pieces of glass as well, but definitely sort of a creepy, eerie part of history. Moving to the right, I have included just a couple of fun items. These are some postcards related to Halloween. I just really like the imagery on them. They're a little lighter. Some of the items on this table are kind of a little heavier, so I threw those in to lighten things up. But next, I'm going to move to the pair of dentures. So I chose, you'll see there's teeth, dentures in general. I think most of us hate going to the dentist. Certainly seeing dentures or teeth really creep a lot of people out. So I thought these were a good thing to include in this display. But what makes these dentures really interesting is because of who they belong to. And they belong to a famous individual, famous mountain man named Jim Baker. And so Jim Baker, actually both Wyoming and Colorado essentially claim him as their own because he's thought to be the first settler in Colorado Territory, but he was also believed to be the first permanent, to have built the first permanent cabin in Wyoming Territory. He has a really interesting life, so just a little bit about him. Beginning in 1938, Baker worked for the American Fur Company during the final years of the Rocky Mountain fur trade. And during his contract, he actually hunted with another famous Colorado person, Kit Carson. So after his contract expires, he goes back to Illinois, but then just a few years later, he comes back to the West. But this time, it's as part of the Bartleson-Bidwell Party, which was the first wagon train of settlers to journey overland on the Oregon Trail and reach California. And these are just a couple details of his life. He's a fascinating individual, so I really encourage you to look him up. But I just love these dentures. You can see, it looks like he had maybe 4 teeth left at the time that he was wearing these dentures, and you can see that one of them has actually been hand mended, which I think is pretty incredible. Sticking with teeth, down at the bottom there, those piles of teeth, those actually belong to some children of one of the most famous Colorado families, the Tabors. So many people know the Tabor family history of sorts, but for those who don't, I'll tell you a little bit. So essentially, Horace Tabor and Baby Doe Tabor, they were the couple, and they were quite famous, or really infamous, in Colorado. And that is because Horace was actually married at the time he started having an affair with Baby Doe. But despite that, he divorces his wife, they get married, and they're actually extremely wealthy. They're one of the most wealthy families in Colorado, one of the most wealthy families in the country, really. But despite that, Baby Doe is really never accepted into the social circles of Denver. But they're really rich, and they make most of their money off of the silver mines. But eventually, this is a story of riches to rags, because they end up losing their money when the U.S. moves to the gold standard in 1893. Horace actually ends up dying not too much later in 1899, and upon his death, he tells Baby Doe to hold on to the matchless mine, which is in Leadville, and she does just that. And she ends up, the rest of her life is pretty destitute. She's quite poor. She lives in rags, and she ends up freezing to death in that cabin. And so it's really just an interesting part of Colorado history. The Tabors and these teeth were from their children. They saved them, much like we do today as well. So moving up just to those dolls, there's not any really particular history to these. I just included them because people are really creeped out by dolls. People are creeped out by clowns, and I think these are really good creepy dolls, especially that clown on the right. I don't think that face is intentionally creepy, but it really freaks me out. So I thought these were fun, and I wanted to include them. We're going to move down just a little bit to some surgical equipment that I've included. No one likes going to the doctor, but certainly if you think about how surgery was done decades to hundreds of years ago, it really was pretty rough. And I don't envy anybody who would have had to have surgical procedures back then. But the first item on the left there, that is actually a tooth extractor, and that was likely used at the end of the 19th century. And then there's an anesthesia mask, as well as a surgeon's bone drill. And that is likely used around the 1920s to the 1940s. So pretty creepy if you ask me. And then we're going to move to the Colt Revolver there. So this gun has a really interesting history. We used to believe it belonged to someone named Alfred Packard. We don't necessarily think that that story is true anymore, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter because it's the story associated with it that is so incredible. And what makes the story so great is that Alfred Packard was also known as the Colorado Cannibal. So here's the story of the Colorado Cannibal. As the story goes, in the winter of 1873 to 74, Packard joined a group of 5 other men who were seeking out gold in the mountains of Colorado. And during their quest, they're told multiple times, this is to postpone their journey until spring because of the winter weather. But they essentially ignore this advice. And come February, they find themselves alone and trapped in heavy snows. And they're essentially starving. And they resort to boiling their own moccasins and eating them. So things are getting really bad. And it's in this context that Alfred Packard says that one night he awakes to another person in his party, Shannon Bell, trying to attack and kill him with a hatchet. And so Alfred Packard says that he defended himself and killed him, the other man, in self-defense. And subsequently he realizes that the other men in the party, the 4 other men as well, have been killed by Bell. And it's at this point, he's starving, it's the middle of winter, he's trapped. He decides to eat and cannibalize the bodies that are left, only as a last resort to survive, he says. But come that spring, he actually stumbles out to a nearby Indian agency, and it's at that point that he tells his story. But really, nobody believes him. They think that he killed all other members in his party intentionally to cannibalize them. So he's sent to jail, and amazingly, he escapes, and he's not captured for another 9 years, and he's found living in Wyoming under the name of John Schwartz. He's given a new trial, sentenced to 40 years in prison. He serves 15 of those and goes on parole. And after parole, he moved to here in Denver, and he essentially spends the rest of his life trying to clear his name until his death in 1907. So I think that's a really great story, the Colorado Cannibal. Next up, we have those pieces of paper above it. These are pieces of paper that are considered part of automatic writing, which was a product of spiritualism. So spiritualism was a movement that was based on the belief that souls can essentially interact with the living, and it was very popular in the late 19th century. So spiritualists sought to make contact with the dead, usually through the assistance of someone like a medium or someone who had the ability to contact the spirits directly. And automatic writing was one of the ways that believers in spiritualism could speak with spirits. It was typically produced through a medium during something like a seance. And so I actually deciphered that top piece of paper. It's not creepy at all. It's actually pretty sweet. It says, or I believe it says, Charles Lobach, Salt Lake City, Utah. I am with you, Jean, and I will help you with writing. I will be here often. Bertha is happy. She loves you and all your family. Good night, Jean. So pretty sweet, not scary, but the idea of talking to spirits is very appropriate for Halloween, so I had to include that. I threw in a photo just for fun of a creepy cemetery here in Denver. But the last item I really want to talk about is this piece on the right. And this is actually made of hair, human hair. It is a hair wreath. So during the Victorian era, European and North American women spent a lot of their time in the home. And to pass the time, they indulged in something called fancy work, which was essentially was a way to display to their friends and neighbors things that they had made and a way to decorate their homes. And one form of this fancy work consisted of making ornate creations from human hair. So back in the day, many women had long, flowing hair, so there was actually quite a lot of raw material to work with, you could say. And this long hair would be woven around thin wire and formed into floral designs, and often adorned with things like beads, buttons, sometimes seeds. A popular shape, you don't see it in this one, but a popular shape was a horseshoe, as that was a Victorian symbol of good luck. And they would actually position it so the horseshoe was positioned with the open side facing up. The idea is that it would actually catch good luck. So originally hair wreaths were made from the hair of deceased loved ones as a way to honor and remember them. But eventually hair wreaths were created for sentimental reasons, and they were given as gifts to friends and loved ones as keepsakes. I think I like this piece just because for some reason there's something about something being made out of human hair that I think creeps a lot of people out. So I had to include this. But that is really the registration window, behind the registration window for the month of October. I really encourage you to go online and explore our collection more. There's other items, I'm sure, that are really appropriate for the month of October and can be inspired by Halloween. Just follow the description in the YouTube video and you can find those things online. So thanks for tuning in for this episode, and come back again for the month of November.